Okay, so we're talking about the forgetting curve. And when you have a forgetting curve, you know, when you read, you have the information right away, you got 100%. But gradually, day by day, it drops to below 20%. And that's how much you remember of the information you went over, whether it be lecture or reading in the textbook, that kind of a thing. So, you know, within 7 days, you are below 20% of what you remember of that information. So if you got information this session, or you read something this session, and you have a test on it a week later, you will probably only remember 20% of that. And that's kind of how your natural memory works. Now, the way to compensate for that is one of the reasons we are learning note taking today. We're going to use Cornell style notes, but there's different ways you can do it. So you start 100%, and look, it's starting to dramatically drop on that first day. But if you've taken notes, then it bumps right back up. If you review your notes, it bumps right back up close to 100%. Again, from day 1 to day 3, it's dropping pretty dramatically. But if you review your notes again, it bumps right back up to 100%. And then finally, you can see the curve is getting less steep. But you still review your notes and it bumps you back up to a higher level. So the whole point of this, why you should be taking notes, is you take notes to review the information, to review it, for lack of a better word, keeping it fresh in your mind, right? And process it. Now, the more you do that, so for example, you can see those curves, they're getting a little wider and less dramatic. So in other words, they're not going as low. That's because you keep reviewing. If you keep reviewing. So, for example, if you have a test like it's 2 weeks away, I mean, that would even be higher. Okay, because you keep reviewing, you review the notes. So in this particular sheet, it's reviewing the first day after, and then reviewing 3rd, and then 6th. So it's 1, 2 days, 3 days, and then probably the next one would be 4 or 5 days. But you would automatically review them every time, and that kind of brings it back for you. Now, helps you retain that information. Keep it in your brain going for long term. Now, there are all different ways to use note taking. So when you're reviewing your notes, you can do it in a variety of ways. So you don't always read or reread your notes, right? I mean, that could be one way. Email it to yourself and read it as an email. Okay? Reformat, whatever, and then read as an email. And what you're doing is reviewing the information, processing, helping to retain. Another way is what we all do is use your phone, right? So put it in there. There's actually note-taking apps, right? So although you took notes maybe the first time by hand, redo them on your phone. The act of writing them out again, or writing them in your own words in a different way, helps you retain the information. One of the key things for retention and to know that you understand it is, number one, you got to understand material before you can process it. You can't remember what you don't understand. And then the second thing is, how do you know you understand the material? You're able to write it in your own words or say it in your own words. So that's another way of reviewing or trying to retain your notes, which is, can you explain it to someone else? Can you explain that information to someone else using your own words? Now, one of the things that I always tell students, if you're going to go over it verbally, as much as you can, use your own words, not reading anything, and explain it like you're explaining it to a 7-year-old. Why? Because it's got to be simple enough that they understand. And that proves you know it enough to change those words to make it easy for someone to understand. If you are simply telling them the same vocabulary that's being used in your notes or in the book, that does not help you process. So as much as possible. Now, of course, you're going to have vocabulary come up that you're gonna need to know specific words, right? And, that's just the nature. However, explaining it as much as possible in your own words helps you retain it much, much better. Okay? Because you gotta understand it in order to retain it. So this is just kind of a nice graph, and I'll pass around if you wanna look at it. This is a nice graph showing the difference if you don't do notes, if you don't review your notes, and if you do your review of notes. Now, here's the trick. If you only do a review one time, it will gradually go down again by the sixth day. It may not go as far down, but it will go down. So hence, you should review your notes in different ways at least 3 or 4 times to really keep that retained in your memory. Make sense? Okay, I'll start here. You can just pass it around. And it's just flip-sided. It's one on one, one on the other. Okay. So today what we're gonna work on is note-taking. Now we are going to be doing Cornell style notes. So what I will tell you, science says there's no specific kind of note-taking that is the best or better than others, right? What science says though are a couple of things relating to your brain. Your brain likes order and predictability. So the more organized your notes are, the better. The second part is your brain likes white space. And white space means you're not cramming everything together line by line by line by line. Because when you go to look at it or review it, what your brain sees is a bunch of words on a paper, not necessarily organized and grouped by anything. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to learn Cornell style note-taking. And you're going to do it in this style for 2 reasons. One, it's a very highly organized and effective way to do note-taking. And if you learn this style, I would recommend that you use it for other classes, not just, to show me you know how. The other reason is because I need to review notes and look them over and grade you on them. And the easiest way for me to do that is if they're all the same style, right? Because then I know exactly what I'm looking for here, 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 and here. Make sense? It is not required you do Cornell style notes for, any of your classes. It'll be dependent. So for example, if you are in a biology class or an anatomy class, they may tell you a specific style that'll work for that subject. But as a generic style, this works across a lot of things. So that's why we're going to be doing them. So if you're here physically in class, I have provided the note-taking sheets for you. I've also provided the Cornell style checklist guideline. Those are both available on Moodle, okay? So on Moodle, just so for the folks that may be watching at home, let me quick show you, sorry, module 5. And in the Cornell Notes assignment, the activity that's going to be graded, okay, I have a video and I'm explaining what I'm going to talk to you in class about today, okay, the lecture. And then down at the bottom, there are 3 files that you can download and print out if you wish. The first one is the Cornell Notes checklist. I'm going to be going over that. There's the Cornell Notes grading rubric, so you can see what I'm grading on. And then the Cornell Notes template. That's the blank sheets that you're going to actually do the notes on. So I will tell you right up front for Cornell Notes, as a general rule, students print as many sheets out as they need, and then they do it by hand. And then just like annotating, they take a picture, save it to the computer, and then upload that file on Moodle. You are allowed to download the template and type your notes, save them, and then upload. However, a couple of words of caveat, or a caveat there, which is your brain processes better if you do handwriting. there's something about the physical motion of writing that triggers it better. It uses more things in your brain, and it forces you to really think about what you're writing rather than simply copying the same words in the textbook. And I do want to emphasize, if you're just copying words down from the textbook onto your notes, that's not what's going to do, that's not what will help you the most in your note taking. As much as possible, use your own wording. So it is your choice. You can type them. I do allow it. But keep in mind, you have to have the correct information in the correct place on that template. The other way, the last option that you have is if you have just plain notebook paper, you know, from a notebook, you can basically draw an upside down T on it. So if you look at my template, it's in thirds, 1, 2, 3. So this is what you would need. And you need to leave space at the top for that information. But you can do like black marker or pen or whatever and draw the lines so it matches. And then you can just use those blue lines on the paper to write in, okay? There was one other thing. Oh yeah, so for those of you who don't like messy, but yet you don't want to make 1,000 copies. They make, they publish whatever you want to call it, a Cornell notebook, right? And this is a specialty notebook and it's basically set up like Cornell note style, right? So you can take notes, and you don't have to worry about drawing your lines. It'll be nice and neat, and all of them will be in the same container, right? I don't know how much I know the bookstore used to sell them. I think they still do. You know, it used to be $5, $6. Now I'm sure it's probably $10, $12, if not more, because prices go up. However, if you don't want to get through the bookstore or if they're out, you can order this like on Amazon Prime or any of those kinds of things. I'm sure it'll be cheaper, you know. But if you will like the convenience of it, I'm very much like that. I want it in my hot little hand right now when I want it, then I would say stop the bookstore cheaper. Okay. I think I've covered all those kinds of things. So now we are going to talk about the Cornell Notes checklist. I'm going to open that a minute. Make sure it is, oh, that wasn't what I wanted. Sorry. I've got them both up. Well, it says checklist. What the French toast, man. Maybe I uploaded the wrong thing to the wrong place. Yep, sure did. I uploaded the same file twice. That's no good. Okay, I have it here in person, but I will, I'll re-upload on Moodle so you have the correct file in the correct spot. So I did give you the rubric, I did give you the template, but it looks like I did not provide you with a checklist, so I will do that. Maybe I put it in resources. Let's see. Note-taking resources. Let's see. Maybe. So in resources, there are videos that show you about Cornell style notes. And you're welcome to watch those if you need a refresher. In the meantime, for those of you at home, I will re-upload the correct version of the Cornell Notes checklist. So for the moment, I'm just going to lecture on it. Those of you who are in class have a copy of it. And the Cornell Notes checklist, and it's a guideline. These are the things you should have or include within your Cornell Notes when you're doing them, okay? So what I do while I'm doing them is I check them as I include them in my notes, right? Keep in mind, you're going to need this for every single page of your Cornell Notes. So you're going to be doing multiple pages, right? And on every single one, you're going to need this kind of information. So let's start at the top. Format includes title, page numbers, name, and date. So you can see at the very, very top, it kind of asks you that information. So it says topic objective. What I would encourage you to do is use whatever the title is of the chapter you're working on, right, that you're taking notes on. Your name, don't worry about class period, that would be a high school thing, but I mean, if you want, you can say English 115, right? And then the date, so the date you are working on this page of notes. Okay? And then essential question, this is essentially, what are you asking? In other words, what do you want to find out? You know how we turn headings into questions? What's the big? So for example, chapter 1, making brain connections, I believe is the title. So, you know, here's the topic, making brain connections or brain connections. And then the essential question would be, you know, how are brain connections made? Or what ways does the brain connect? Okay, that kind of thing, it's your call, but that's what I'm talking about, turn that into a question. So the next one, so I've got all that, check. Okay, I'll check that out. The next one contains proper keywords or potential test question in appropriate sections. This is the section on the left that has like the big idea, okay, the left column. And you can have headings, questions, big idea topics. You can also turn each heading into a test question and list it in that column. Be sure to use higher thinking questions, not just concrete level. So in other words, use how, not just what is. Okay, so what I'm talking about is this section right here. This is where you would have the big idea or possible questions. Now, if you have no idea what to put there, you have no questions, you know, you're just not curious at all about that chapter, right? I suggest is you look at the headings and you turn them into questions. So whatever the first section is, I would start that as turn that heading into a question. And that's this column here, okay? Then the third one is it contains examples, details, rephrasing, and appropriate section. You're gonna write down any information that helps you understand the concept, the topic, what you think may be important to know for a test. You can use bullets for items, make sure you leave white space. There is no need for full sentences. Go ahead and use note form. Now, what I mean by that is this section right here. So based on this question of the topic, like, let's just pick an easy one. What is reading? Okay, we would have, what is reading? That's my question. I turn the heading into a question. And here I'm going to use bullet points, little stars, whatever you want. And I am going to contain either examples or the information that I'm reading about as much as I can in my own words. So whatever the important parts are, bullet. And this is the other item that I usually share, which is make sure you leave yourself white space. What I mean is the goal is not to fill every single line there, right? It's the goal is at a glance, you're going to be able to see and how it's organized so you can quickly identify different things or whatever the items are, okay? So far, we've talked about this one, the top, we've talked about the left column, and then we talked about the center with details. Next, the summary section has 2 to 4 sentences that properly correspond to information on that page. In this section, you need full and complete sentences in your own words that summarize the information contained in the notes above. So, here's question or rephrased heading into question. Details or important information that you feel you're going to need to know, bullet points related to that section. And then down here, whatever information I have up here, I have to turn it in my own words and I have to provide at least 2 to 3 sentences. So 2 to 3 sentences, rephrasing or putting into my own words, the information I took in notes up here. So remember, you're not writing the sentences up here, you are writing in full sentences here, you need 2 to 3 at the bottom. And you are only summarizing what the information is up here. Right? Not anything more. So whatever you took in notes. Okay. And then the last thing is your number of pages are approximate to the number of content pages and level of difficulty. The average ratio is 2 to 1. 2 of these for every 1 page of content. Now that's probably in my book, my textbook. If you get a different one that has what I would call more intense content or heavier based content, something like, well, biology is a good example, accounting is another good example, right? If you read those pages, there is a ton of information on there. So that means you probably are gonna go more of a 3 or 4 to 1 page. Make sense? Of text. Okay. That is content. I'm gonna do an activity with you guys. We don't have anybody virtual today, so I will simply do the activity in class. But are there questions before we do a demonstration round together?
Is it like 1, 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the copies I gave you are front and back. But yeah, this would be 1 page, that would be considered 1 page. This would be considered a 2nd page,
And
right?
is it multiple questions or is it like 1 and then you dive into your notes and then you summarize?
Good question. It depends on how much content there are.
Okay.
Sometimes it may be just 1, and there's a lot of information in that section. And here's the other possibility. You may not get through an entire section on 1 page. It may take 2 pages to get through that exact same question. So what you do is you just simply repeat the question and just continue on. The trick here is when you do your summary at the bottom of the page, it's only for the information on that page. And this one is the same deal. It's only for the information on that page. Make sense? We'll walk through it. Hopefully that will clear it up a little bit more for you or clarify. Any other questions or anything else I can clarify? I mean, we are gonna walk through this, but, people on the video won't be able to see it because it's too hard to see tiny papers. I don't have a doc cam today, it looks like. However, all the sheets are on the page and I have a video demonstrating on the assignment. So people from home or whoever's watching the video, they'll be able to follow that and see it. Okay, I am going to stop recording if there are no more questions.